Zambia Blog Talk Radio.
Do you want to promote your business on Zambia Blog Talk Radio? Yes, that's right. Live on Zambia Blog Talk Radio. To book your spot, just make a donation by picking from the following categories. To get started, just call or WhatsApp the number on the screen and you'll be good to go. Live on Zambia Blog Talk Radio every Saturday for 1 full month. And it will stay on the recorded shows.
Hi everyone, welcome to our midweek special feature. It is Wednesday, October the 12th, and we do appreciate you joining us from wherever you are watching us. This is one of a kind show that we are going to do, and there might be a number of series of these shows that we might be working on in the coming weeks and in the coming days. Okay, thank you so much, everybody. If you have not followed us or you are not part of the ZBTR family, you need to subscribe to our YouTube channel, ZBTR TV, or follow us on Facebook, Zambia Blog Talk Radio, and we're also on Twitter, Zambia Blog Radio. All right, I have a special guest today, and we're going to have a very interesting and unique conversation. Because you see, when people throw things on social media, at times they capture your attention and you get drawn to it or something like that. So today's show, I'm simply calling it Conversations with Tannai. So joining us today on Zambia Blog Talk Radio for the first of many times, I'm already throwing an invitation there in advance, is Tannai Hatembo. She is going to speak about a lot of things that our young folks are experiencing and what is going on in our life, our career, family, school life, and social life. Tannai, welcome to Zambia Blog Talk Radio.
Thank you so much for having me, Pastor Nathan. This is a really cool experience.
All right, amazing. I'm looking forward to it. So tell us about yourself. When and where does your journey to the United States begin?
So my name is Tannai Hatembo, and I was originally born in Lusaka, Zambia. We moved to the United States when I was 3 years old, and I haven't been back since. At this time, I'm legally a licensed vocational nurse who actually works for an animation company doing search engine optimization and content creation. I basically help their social media, their websites rank for search and grow their awareness because I have a TikTok presence where I talk about films, movies, TV shows, things like that. Sometimes books that caught the attention of this company.
Okay. Wow. So you told me you have what, 70?
No.
How many followers do you have on TikTok?
I've got 77,000.
70. So just give me half. I just half of that.
I keep telling you, you need to come to TikTok. There's a lot
I need
of
to come on TikTok, right? So you came when you were 3 years old. Basically, which means you've gone to school here, right?
Yes. Pre-K,
So
all the way to high school.
So your perception, your worldview of issues is based on the education system that you have come through, right? Your mom and dad have got a different perspective and perception about things based on their education system. Okay, I'll tell you what. For us, we learned about the capital cities of the world, and we learned about the tundra regions and things like that. We learned about African history and all those things. I know you guys read books like Roll a Thunder, right? Counting the Stars, To Kill a Mockingbird. Is that?
Yes.
To Kill a Mockingbird? All right, okay. I read Jelita and Mulenga. I already see a smile on your dad's face when I say Jelita and Mulenga. And we read Shylock. Can you remember? Okay. So I want you to talk about how this has affected your perception about your Zambian roots and conversations in your family.
How my perceptions changed because of my American education.
Yes, because of your American education.
Okay. Well, when it comes to African history, that's not really something taught in American school systems.
No, no.
Not at all. The same way you learn about the capitals and cities, we did the same thing in the United States. I can count all 50 states, but I don't know all of the countries in Africa. I am more, I guess, knowledgeable than I think African Americans in the sense that I already know that Africa consists of countries and not states. That's something a lot of people say to me. They're like, "Oh, how many states in Africa?" But when it comes to what we learned in school, we read books like To Kill a Mockingbird, Night by Elie Wiesel, which is about the Holocaust, The Outsiders, which is about basically, the 1920s, 1950s New York, things like that. But we didn't actually dive into American history thoroughly enough. What we in school is about slavery, but as a young adult now, what I've come to realize is the account of slavery that we're taught about is basically reduced to protect the fragility of certain demographics. How actually, I've actually had to do a lot of learning on my own.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you see, the reason I mentioned that is that all of us, of course, our worldview and perception about things is influenced by the education system that we came through. I would like also to know, as far as education is concerned, what type of conversations you've had with mom and dad.
As in African history?
Yes. And as your education, the education system that you have come through.
Well, this might be where there's a bit of a barrier because, like you said, my parents grew up on African history. I grew up knowing African American history. And there'll be times where I'll tell them about like the details of slavery and emancipation and all the things that went into Black Americans forming their own identity that they don't necessarily understand. And they'll give me information about Zambia, more specifically about the Tonga tribe and the Lazi tribe, which is where I guess I identify with.
Yes.
And to me, it's interesting, but there's a disconnect because it feels more like a fable to say. It doesn't feel in a sense because I've grown up here and don't necessarily have any actual interactions with that side of myself.
All right. So I like the word you're using when you say a disconnect. Okay. So right there is where we zero into our conversation to say there was a quest that triggered something in you to try and to go on a certain path to sort of reconnect with your roots, with your parents' roots, which you refer to as being the Lozi line and the Tonga line. Okay, it's interesting. You see, our African roots are this intermarriage thing. So what triggered that thing in you? When did that happen? What led to that?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, on my TikTok, I talk about TV, movies, sometimes books, and they usually spark interesting conversations that I want to have. So I recently watched a movie called The Woman King. I don't know if you've seen it or heard about it.
Amazing. I watched it last week too.
I thought it was such a great movie, but the reception of it was confusing me. A lot of people have been trying to get the film banned for various reasons, but the biggest one being is that some people believe that the account of history shown in the movie glorifies the actions of this Western tribe and their commitment and involvement with slavery.
Yeah.
So I started doing research on the Goji warriors and ended up finding out a lot about the truth behind the stories told about them. To make a long story short, the history presented about the Western Kingdom of Dahomey, it was written by the colonizer, and the perception
Mm.
or perspective a lot of people aren't aware of influences how we see them today, and that
Exactly.
in a way made me want to know more about, I guess, Africa and myself from this.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm. Interesting. So you see, going back to the question that I asked about our perceptions and worldviews being influenced by the education system, when you went and watched that movie and you did your research, I would like you to talk about what you found out in your research, what you discovered, in contrasting to what often we are taught in school, what is said to us. Like you said, protecting a certain demographic.
Mhm. So in school, a lot of the history regarding slavery and African American history is
Mm,
reduced to reflect the fragility of, to be very frank, white students. It's baseless and lacks emotion. It tells facts that don't necessarily align with the truth. There's a book called Post Traumatic Slave Syndrome that I read earlier this year by a psychologist called Dr. Joy DeGay Lundy, and she talks
mm,
about this thing called cognitive dissonance. In a way, it's a person's ability to make things up that fit the narrative in their mind, even though their actions and past and history don't align up. So what we're taught in school is to validate the actions of a lot of colonizers, which were typically white, sometimes Spanish people. Um,
mm.
and in that sense, the same thing was occurring in the Woman King. You learn about the Agoji warriors, but what history shows is that they were beast-like savages who lacked morality, decorum, but when I did my research, I found out that the director, Gina Prince Bythewood, who's actually the director of a movie called Love and Basketball, um, she ended up discovering a number of books written by
Mhm.
missionaries that got to visit Benin, where the Dahomey tribe was. And they, because they didn't want anything necessarily tangible from this tribe, wrote about their beauty and the way that they operated. And that account drastically differs from what other historians have said about the Dahomey tribe. They
Yes.
painted them very badly. So it just depends on who's writing your history. I think we have to pay attention to that. And in school, they're not teaching kids the truth because, again, history is written by the victors.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. That's very true. Um, Obviously, of a lot of challenging issues to do with cultural barriers. What have been some of your experiences? What are some of the encounters that you can talk about? I think you've, to some extent, what you've said, you already addressed the school environment. Apart from what is taught in school, what we receive from the instructors, if I may use that word, which we categorize as teachers or even professors at college level. I want you to talk about some cultural barriers in school and then at home.
Cultural barriers in school. Well, I went to a predominantly white high school, and during my time there, I think there might have been in the ninth grade 10 to 15 black students in a class of 400. By the
Mm,
time I graduated high school, there might have been like 50 of us in my yearbook. I was one of the few African students. I think there was about 3 or 4 of us specifically born outside of the US. I noticed that the way African Americans and sometimes Africans treat each other or interact is, I don't want to use the word hostile, but we we notice each other's differences because African Americans, when they were brought to the United States, had to reinvent their history in a way that Africans don't. We know our history. I'm here questioning my history, but I can simply ask my parents. I can call my grandmother. They don't have the same connection to who they used to be that we do. And growing up, I felt like the conversations that we were having were basically to determine whether the African American experience was more valid than the African experience. And that's where issues can sometimes arise in, hormonal teenagers when we're figuring ourselves out. So I think that's the biggest barrier to understanding each other as adolescents.
Let me interrupt you. How do we deal with that hostility? I see it a lot between us from Africa and the African community. I see that hostility. At times it's silent and it can be triggered by something. How do you think we should deal with it, or how did you deal with it?
When I was in high school, I don't think I actually acknowledged the barriers between us as much as I am now. You learn a lot of things looking backwards, and maturity gives you a new sense and perspective. I think the biggest way to address the issue between Africans and African Americans would be basically for history to be rewritten. African Americans spend all their time in adolescence learning that they were in an oppressed position, that they didn't have any real freedom, opportunity, that their entire life has been about fighting, and that's what's taught to young kids when they're super impressionable. If I didn't come from Africa and I was born here, I think I would have the same level of maybe anger and fear. They are forced to adopt as children. So it really just starts with rewriting history, because they need to know about the beauty of blackness in a way that we know about the beauty of being African.
Okay, talk about the other aspect of the question: cultural barriers at home or in the family.
Well, I don't think there's too many cultural barriers at home. Like I said, I don't speak my language, and I'm saying my language very loosely because my parents have spoken several languages in our household, predominantly Nyanja. My dad is Tonga, mom is Lazi, but they usually speak to each other in Nyanja. I guess that's where they chose to meet in the middle. And growing up, I really wasn't, I guess, too bothered by this. I lived. But as a young adult, the more I want to know about myself, the more I think that understanding my language would be the best place to start, or understanding the language my parents speak would be a great place to start. So the biggest barrier that we've had to address is the fact that they never taught us any of the languages.
And that is very common in most, let me not say all, in most African families or homes, or immigrant homes. Let me throw this question at you. So what do you think we need to learn? Those who've got younger kids than yourselves, okay? Those who have got younger kids who are watching this, what would you say to them about addressing that issue of the language?
So, speaking, I guess, to the younger kids, follow your curiosity, and probably you need to start having conversations with your parents and say, hey, what's done is done. There's no point in, I guess, being upset about it.
Yeah.
Them to say, this is where you're at. I'd like to start learning. And it just starts off with small words. My parents are really good about saying certain things over and over in the household that have helped me know exactly when or what they're trying to say. And before I've actually addressed that I want to know Nyanja, they've been speaking to me very more often than not in Nyanja now. Even when I don't understand now, they're helping me out. So if you're a younger kid, talk to your parents, talk to your legal guardians, and say, let's figure out how to take first steps.
Okay, all right. So how is that Nyanja process coming along? How is it going?
It's a lot of fun. It's not just my parents who are teaching me Nyanja. I've been getting in contact with my grandparents, my
Mm-hmm.
grandmothers. Is so funny because now she will answer the phone when I call her, speaks to me in Nyanja, and keeps repeating things. She's helping me learn certain phrases. I'm making it a really fun process.
Okay, interesting. So that is you. How is it going with your siblings?
Um, I think that I'm at a different position in life than my siblings because the
Mm-hmm.
youngest one is 19, then there's 20, and then 24. I don't think they have the same, curiosity yet about Zambia or African life. It just comes with maturity. So
Yes, yes.
watch me, and I think because I'm taking that first step, eventually they'll follow suit.
Mm. So in a family setup, we shouldn't shove it under somebody's throat. We should let them make the discover their own footsteps or whatever they want to find out, right?
I think if they're younger, as a parent, you get to make that choice. If
Mm.
they're, let's say, anything below maybe 15, teenagers, they're still pretty impressionable. So you can actually make the choice and say, hey, I want you to know this language so that you don't end up being like me at 25, struggling and having a more difficult process later on. And so that would be on the job. That would be the responsibility of the parent at that age. But for
Okay.
parents who have maybe young adults like me, let them come to you, and wherever they are, meet them where they're at. It's gonna take a while. No one expects to um, have all the answers very quickly.
Mm. Mm. That's very true. Interesting. There are a lot of other people having the same experience, family level, personal level, career level, um, a lot at a lot of levels. Our lives are intertwined or woven with a lot of things. So a lot of people having this same experience. What did you say to them in terms of how you are navigating the process and how they should navigate the process?
Mm, There's no real right answer to this question. I think the
Hmm.
person who is is curious about who they are will know what steps to take next. Just follow
Okay.
your intuition. My intuition told me to talk about a movie that inspired more conversations and share it with others. Your intuition might just inspire you to talk to a friend, a family member, um, and you'll go from there. There's
Hmm.
literature these days. There's access to the internet. There's social media platforms that actually um, teach you about anything you're looking for. So it's all a learning process.
It's a learning process. So you tell me, you are saying that on your TikTok you make commentary reviews on movies, on books. Or have you read any African writers' books? Have you read any books written by Africans or African writer series?
No, actually, I haven't written any books written specifically by Africans, but I do own a copy of. I think there's an author called I don't want to
Chinua
mispronounce.
Achebe.
Yes, I was a little bit nervous. Um, okay, I have that, and then actually I have a book here that I just ordered, and it came in the mail today. Um, have you seen this before?
I
African
think so, yes.
Wing.
Africa.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
I'm really good about reading. Whatever my
It's good. It's good. It's good. I'm glad you're talking about reading because that's one thing that we are not doing so much. We need to be reading a lot, especially about African stuff and our history and our. So tonight, I want us to continue this conversation, and we're not going to do it today. Obviously, everybody watching, depending on tonight's availability and how much time she's going to give us and allow us to talk about a lot of things. You see, I went to your TikTok page and I was like this. I was like, oh my goodness me.
I have lots of conversations there.
It's amazing. It's amazing. If you want to know a lot about what she's doing, that's those of you that are on TikTok. That's do you call it a page or link? What's the terminology?
say page. Yeah.
It's a page. Okay, that's Tannai's page, Tannai TV Guide. And you follow us. She has some amazing stuff there, and you just need to go there. So I'm not going to promise everybody that we're going to do this again next weekend. What I would like us to do is to bring up some videos here of what you have done, and then we talk about them if that's fine with you. Is that cool?
Right now?
No, not now.
Oh, okay. I was like, well, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, we can do that next week, and so that this was just to get the people to know you, to meet you, and to get to understand where this quest for you to reconnect and to deal with some of a little bit of cultural barriers that we're dealing with as people to know you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. May I say one quick thing?
Yes, please.
So my TikTok is about TV, movies, and books. And over the last year, I've started to incorporate more books about, I guess, or more content about African Americans. If you go on my TikTok and share any books, movies, TV shows that relate to Africa, or even more specifically Zambia, I can add that to the content that I can produce to talk about and basically invite you guys into my audience. I think that would be.
Yeah, I think we can do that. And maybe if I find $1 million to pay your dad, he might agree to come up on this show. Will $1 million do it, or I need to find more?
1,000,001. 1,000,001.
1,000,001. That will do it. Yeah. All right. Okay. Somebody just sent a message to say they're excited to say, that's my cousin. I've never met her, blah, blah, blah. I'll let you have that information later. Tonight, thank you for doing this. Everybody, do join us again sometime when we work on another show with Tonight. I just wanted us to sort of share a few little things. Our regular broadcasting is every Saturday, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time and 1600 hours in Zambia. So do join us then, and thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.
Zambia Blog Talk Radio.